With one desperate lunge across the elegant dinner table, waitress Sophia Reeves knocked the poisoned champagne flute from the billionaire's grasp, unwittingly igniting a chain reaction that would expose secrets powerful enough to shatter the foundations of American democracy. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. A single moment, a flash of recognition, was all it took for Sophia Reeves to change the course of many lives that night. The crystal flute of rosé champagne arced through the air, its contents catching the light from the ornate chandeliers as liquid splashed across the immaculate tablecloth. The elegant dining room of Le Ciel fell silent, all eyes turning to the waitress whose arm was still extended in the aftermath of her dramatic intervention. "And what the hell do you think you're doing?" Alexander Blackwood demanded, his voice low but trembling with barely contained fury. The 52-year-old real estate tycoon straightened his silk tie, acutely aware of the attention now focused on their table. Sophia stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sir, I apologize for the disruption, but I couldn't let you drink that." The restaurant's maitre d' appeared at her side almost instantly, his expression a practiced mask of concern. "Miss Reeves, what is the meaning of this? Mr. Blackwood is one of our most valued patrons." "There was something in his drink," Sophia stated firmly, though her voice remained quiet. "And I saw it being added when I was approaching the table." Murmurs rippled through the restaurant as diners exchanged glances, smartphones discreetly emerging to capture the unfolding drama. Alexander's dinner companion, a striking woman in her 30s, wearing an emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair, remained unnervingly calm, dabbing at the splash marks on her sleeve with a napkin. "That's absurd," the woman said, offering a tight smile to those at neighboring tables. "I think this waitress has had some sort of episode." 20 minutes earlier, Sophia had been having the most ordinary of shifts. At 28, she had worked at Le Ciel for nearly 3 years, using the generous tips to fund her forensic science classes at the local university. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the bills and offered a flexibility that accommodated her studies. Tonight had been busy, but manageable until she spotted him, Alexander Blackwood, whose face had been splashed across the business section of every newspaper in the city after his latest acquisition, a controversial takeover of a beloved historic theater. What made her pause wasn't his celebrity status, but his companion. As Sophia delivered an order to a nearby table, she caught a glimpse of familiar movement, a sleight of hand so subtle it would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent hundreds of hours studying similar techniques in her Chemistry of Poisons elective. The woman had tilted her head, laughing at something Alexander said, while her manicured fingers slipped something from her clutch and into his drink in one fluid motion. Now, as security personnel appeared at the edges of the dining room, Sophia knew her next words would determine whether she was escorted out in disgrace or taken seriously. "Sir," she addressed Alexander directly, ignoring the growing crowd of onlookers, "I study forensic toxicology. What I just witnessed was textbook. Your companion added something to your drink while you were looking at the dessert menu." Alexander's expression shifted slightly as he turned to look at his date, whose composure was beginning to crack. "Vanessa, this is ridiculous," Vanessa hissed, clutching her purse tighter. "Why would I possibly want to poison you? We've only been dating for 3 weeks. 8 weeks, Alexander corrected automatically, his eyes narrowing. "And I never mentioned poison. Neither did she." He nodded toward Sophia. The restaurant manager approached, phone in hand. "Sir, we've called the police. They'll be here momentarily. In the meantime, perhaps we could move this discussion somewhere more private." Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. "I don't have to listen to these accusations. I'm leaving." "I'm afraid we can't allow that, ma'am," said a deep voice from behind her. A plainclothes security officer that Sophia recognized as former police detective Marco Delgado, who handled security for the upscale restaurant district, blocked Vanessa's path. "If there's been an attempt on Mr. Blackwood's life, we need to secure the scene until authorities arrive." Alexander's face had drained of color as the reality of the situation sank in. He looked at his champagne flute, now lying on its side, its contents soaking into the white tablecloth. "You really think she tried to poison me?" Sophia nodded, aware that her job was almost certainly forfeit regardless of how this played out. "I'm certain of it, sir." Within minutes, the police arrived, and the remaining guests were asked to stay in their seats while statements were taken. The glass was carefully bagged as evidence, along with the tablecloth. Vanessa Donovan, as she had identified herself, maintained her innocence with increasing desperation as officers escorted her to a private room for questioning. Alexander found Sophia waiting near the kitchen, where she had been instructed to remain until her statement could be recorded. "Why did you do it?" he asked without preamble. "You must have known you'd likely lose your job, even if you were right." Sophia looked up at him, fatigue suddenly washing over her. "Because it was the right thing to do. I couldn't just watch and do nothing." Alexander studied her for a long moment. "You said you study forensic toxicology. What made you so sure?" "The movement," Sophia explained. "In my advanced course, we study videos of poisoning attempts to identify behavioral patterns. The way she waited for your attention to shift, the specific finger positioning to conceal the substance, the way she used her laugh to cover the sound of something effervescing in the liquid, it was textbook." A detective approached them, notebook in hand. "Miss Reeves, I'm Detective Harlow. I need to ask you some questions about what you witnessed." As Sophia recounted her observations in precise detail, Alexander watched her with growing interest. Her description was methodical, clinical even, as she explained exactly what had caught her attention and why it had triggered her response. "We'll need to run tests on the glass and liquid, of course," Detective Harlow said, "but Ms. Donovan was carrying this in her purse." He held up an evidence bag containing a small vial with a clear residue inside. "Preliminary field test suggests it's a compound containing digitalis, extracted from foxglove, potentially lethal, especially mixed with alcohol." Alexander blanched. "I have a heart condition. It would have looked like natural causes." "Exactly," the detective confirmed. "We're trying to establish her motive now, but she's not being cooperative." "I can tell you her motive," Alexander said grimly. "She's not Vanessa Donovan. Her real name is Vanessa Chambers. My company acquired a pharmaceutical startup 3 months ago, Chambers Biotech. It was failing, and the founder, Richard Chambers, took his own life shortly after the sale. This woman is his daughter." The detective made a note. "Revenge, then." "It appears so," Alexander said, then turned back to Sophia. "You saved my life tonight." Sophia shook her head slightly. "I just did what anyone with my training would have done." "No," Alexander insisted. "Most people would have second-guessed themselves or decided it wasn't their business. You acted decisively." He paused. "When this is sorted out, I'd like to speak with you further. I have a proposition that might interest someone with your skills." Before Sophia could respond, the restaurant manager approached, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Reeves, while your actions may have been heroic, I'm afraid you created quite a scene. We have protocols for handling suspicions about guests, and what you did violated at least 6 different company policies." Alexander interrupted. "Are you actually planning to discipline the woman who just saved my life?" the manager faltered. "Well, our protocols clearly state." "I don't give a damn about your protocols," Alexander said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "This woman prevented what would have been a catastrophe for your establishment. Imagine the headlines: "Billionaire poisoned at Le Ciel." Instead, you get "Quick-thinking waitress prevents tragedy." I suggest you reconsider whatever action you were about to take." The manager retreated, muttering apologies. Sophia looked at Alexander with newfound curiosity. "Thank you for that, but you don't need to fight my battle. Consider it enlightened self-interest," Alexander replied with a slight smile. "I've learned to recognize exceptional talent, Ms. Reeves, and I suspect there's more to your story than meets the eye." As police led Vanessa through the restaurant in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Sophia. The look of pure hatred sent a chill down Sophia's spine. Something told her this wasn't over, not by a long shot. What Sophia couldn't possibly know was how right she was. Vanessa Chambers was merely the tip of an iceberg, a single actor in a much larger conspiracy that had been set in motion years ago. And her desperate act tonight had just accelerated a countdown that would soon expose secrets buried deep in the foundations of Alexander Blackwood's empire. Secrets that would leave everyone speechless when they came to light. The following morning, Sophia woke to her phone buzzing incessantly. News of the incident had spread faster than she'd anticipated. Local stations were running the story on repeat, complete with blurry cell phone footage captured by restaurant patrons. The headline, "Waitress Saves Billionaire from Poisoning Plot," was trending across social media platforms. She silenced her phone and dragged herself to the kitchen of her small apartment. Her roommate, Mia Chen, a cybersecurity analyst with perpetually tousled hair and thick-framed glasses, was already at the counter, sipping coffee and scrutinizing her laptop screen. "There she is, the hero of Le Ciel," Mia announced, turning her laptop to show a news article featuring a grainy image of Sophia. "You're famous." "Infamous is more like it," Sophia groaned, pouring herself coffee. "I probably don't have a job anymore." "Are you kidding? After what you did? They'd be insane to fire you." Sophia shook her head. "You don't know, Vincent. Our manager values discretion above all else. He'd rather let a customer die quietly than cause a scene." "Well, then he's an idiot," Mia declared, returning to her screen. "By the way, I did some digging on your billionaire. Alexander Blackwood isn't just rich. He's connected. Government contracts, overseas investments, ties to intelligence communities. And Vanessa Chambers, she's more than just a vengeful daughter. She's got quite the background herself. Graduated MIT, worked for intelligence contractors. This wasn't some impulsive revenge plot," Sophia frowned. "How do you know all this?" Mia's fingers flew across the keyboard. "You know what I do for a living. Besides, I got curious when my roommate became breaking news." She looked up. "Be careful, Soph. You might have stumbled into something bigger than you realize." Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Reeves, this is Genevieve Adler, Chief of Staff for Alexander Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you today, if possible. A car can pick you up in 1 hour." Sophia glanced at Mia, who raised an eyebrow. Yes, that would be fine." "Excellent. The car will be downstairs at 10. And Ms. Reeves, Mr. Blackwood requested you bring your academic credentials." After the call ended, Mia closed her laptop. "You're not seriously going, are you? What choice do I have? He's the reason I'm not in jail for assault right now. Just be careful. Rich men with power don't extend invitations like this without wanting something in return." An hour later, Sophia found herself in the back of a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, being driven to the Blackwood Tower in the heart of downtown. The driver, a stern-faced woman who introduced herself only as Hayes, remained silent throughout the journey. The elevator took her directly to the penthouse office on the 58th floor. The doors opened to reveal a minimalist space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. Alexander Blackwood stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the skyline. "Ms. Reeves," he said, turning. "Thank you for coming." He gestured to a seating area with 2 leather chairs. Please join me." Up close, in the daylight, Alexander looked older than he had appeared in the dim restaurant lighting. His face bore the subtle signs of recent stress, faint shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw. Still, he carried himself with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to power. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here," he began, studying her with shrewd eyes. "And I assume it's about last night," Sophia replied, maintaining her composure despite her nerves. "Partially. Yes, I've spent the morning being briefed by my security team and the police. Vanessa Chambers, or whatever her real name might be, is refusing to cooperate. But the substance in her vial was indeed digitalis. Combined with something else the lab is still analyzing, it would have been lethal, especially given my medical history." He paused. "You noticed something in a split second that my personal security team missed entirely. That interests me greatly." Sophia shifted in her seat. "As I mentioned, I've studied these scenarios extensively." "Yes, your forensic toxicology courses." Alexander produced a folder. Your academic record is impressive, top of your class, specializing in detection and analysis of biological agents. Yet you're working as a waitress. Tuition isn't free, Sophia replied evenly, and the hours accommodate my class schedule. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. Here's what puzzles me. Ms. Reeves, your response last night wasn't just educated. It was instinctive. People with mere academic knowledge hesitate. You didn't. That suggests training beyond what's available in a university setting. Sophia remained silent, her heart rate accelerating slightly. Furthermore, he continued, you specifically mentioned studying videos of poisoning attempts. That kind of material isn't typically included in standard forensic curriculums. It's specialized, the kind of training intelligence agencies provide. The room felt suddenly smaller. What exactly are you implying, Mr. Blackwood? I'm not implying anything. I'm making an observation. He leaned forward. Your background check shows an interesting gap year between your undergraduate studies and your current program. Care to elaborate on what you were doing during that time? Sophia maintained eye contact. Traveling. Finding myself, the usual post-college exploration. In Langley, Virginia, perhaps? Alexander asked, his tone casual but his gaze intent. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. I think we can help each other, Ms. Reeves, Alexander finally said. Someone wants me dead, and it's not just Vanessa Chambers. She's a pawn in a larger game. I need someone with your particular skill set to help me understand who's behind this and why. I'm a student and a waitress, Mr. Blackwood. Whatever you think I am, please, he interrupted. We're beyond that now. The attempt on my life is connected to something bigger. In the past month, 3 other CEOs with government contracts similar to mine have had accidents. 2 died. 1 survived but is in a coma. I believe I was meant to be the 4th. He slid a tablet across the table. On it was a confidential intelligence brief detailing the suspicious deaths. This isn't corporate rivalry. It's coordinated, and it has all the hallmarks of a professional operation. Sophia's training kicked in as she scanned the report. The pattern was unmistakable, precise, methodical, expertly disguised. Why come to me? She asked. You have resources, connections, because I don't know who I can trust, Alexander admitted. My security team failed. My date tried to kill me. And whoever is orchestrating this has access to my inner circle. He paused. You, on the other hand, are an unknown variable. You weren't supposed to be part of the equation, and you've already proven yourself observant and capable. Before Sophia could respond, Alexander's chief of staff entered. Sir, there's been a development. The police just found Vanessa Chambers dead in her holding cell, apparent suicide. Alexander's face darkened. No, that's not possible. She was under constant surveillance. Nevertheless, she's dead, and there's something else. Genevieve lowered her voice. She left a message, scratched into her forearm. What did it say? Alexander demanded. The phoenix rises from the ashes, Genevieve replied, and beneath it, a name, Sophia Reeves. All eyes turned to Sophia, whose blood ran cold as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about Alexander Blackwood anymore. Somehow, impossibly, she had become a target too. It appears, Alexander said grimly, that our time frame has just accelerated considerably. The phoenix rises from the ashes, Sophia repeated under her breath. The phrase triggered something in her memory, a classified briefing from her past, a connection she couldn't quite grasp. This isn't a coincidence, Alexander said, pacing the length of his office. Vanessa couldn't have known your name unless she was given it in advance. You were identified before you ever intervened. Genevieve stepped forward. Sir, I've initiated lockdown protocol. Security is sweeping the building, and I've contacted our people at the police department for the surveillance footage from Chambers' cell. Alexander nodded. Good, and get Hayes up here immediately. He turned to Sophia. I believe we're past the point of pretense, Miss Reeves, or should I call you Agent Reeves? Sophia weighed her options. Her cover was compromised, and the situation had escalated beyond what she could manage alone. I was never an agent, she clarified. I was an analyst with a specialization in chemical and biological threats. I left the agency 18 months ago. Why? Alexander asked bluntly. Ethical disagreements, she replied, her expression hardening. Let's leave it at that for now. The door opened, and Hayes, The driver, who had brought Sophia to the building, entered. She was dressed differently now, in tactical pants and a fitted jacket that didn't quite conceal the holster at her side. "Perimeter is secure," she reported, "but we have a problem. The CCTV feeds for the past hour were compromised. Someone sliced into our system." Alexander cursed under his breath. This is exactly what happened at Westridge Technologies before Gregory Palmer's accident. He looked at Sophia. "They're already here, aren't they?" She nodded grimly. "Most likely. This is a multi-phase operation. Vanessa was just the first attempt. They always have contingencies." "Who are they?" Alexander demanded. "And that's what we need to find out," Sophia replied. "But first, we need to get you somewhere secure. This building is compromised." Hayes was already on her comm unit, mobilizing extraction team. "Secure route to Safe House Alpha." "No," Alexander countered. "Not Alpha. They'll expect that. We use the contingency location." Hayes hesitated. "Sir, that location isn't in the official protocol. Only you and I know about it." "Exactly," Alexander said. "And right now, I don't trust any protocol that more than 2 people know about." He turned to Sophia. "I need your expertise. Will you help me?" Before Sophia could answer, her phone chimed with a text message. It was from Mia. "Get out now. Building security systems compromised. Fire suppression system being remotely accessed." As if on cue, the overhead sprinklers activated, except instead of water, a fine mist with a slightly sweet odor began to fill the room. "Gas!" Sophia shouted, already moving toward the emergency kit on the wall. She pulled out 4 respirators, tossing them to the others. "Put these on. It's likely a paralytic compound." Hayes was first to secure her respirator, then helped Genevieve with hers, while Sophia assisted Alexander. The gas was spreading rapidly. "This way," Alexander directed, his voice muffled through the mask as he moved toward what appeared to be a solid wall. He pressed his palm against a hidden scanner, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a private elevator. "It's a secure lift," he explained as they hurried inside. "Separate power supply, no network connection to the main building systems." As the doors closed, Sophia felt the elevator descending rapidly. "Where are we going?" "Underground access to a private garage," Alexander replied. "From there, we have options." Sophia's mind raced. The attack was sophisticated and well coordinated. Whoever was behind it had resources, access, and planning capabilities beyond what a corporate rival or vengeful daughter could muster. The elevator stopped, and they emerged into a small, well-lit garage containing 3 vehicles: a nondescript sedan, an armored SUV, and a sleek motorcycle. "Hayes, take Mrs. Adler in the SUV," Alexander instructed. "Create a diversion. We'll use the sedan." Hayes looked uncertain. "Sir, protocol states I don't leave your side, and I'm telling you that protocol might get us killed today," Alexander replied firmly. "I trust Sophia's instincts. They've saved my life once already." Hayes reluctantly complied, leading Genevieve toward the SUV. "You know how to drive that?" Alexander asked, nodding toward the motorcycle as they headed for the sedan. "Yes," Sophia replied, "but the sedan makes more sense. Less exposed." Alexander smiled grimly as he slid into the passenger seat. "Smart. That's why Hayes won't expect us to switch vehicles 2 blocks from here." As Sophia pulled out of the garage, following Alexander's directions through a series of service tunnels, she found herself reassessing the man beside her. He was more strategic than she had initially given him credit for, with contingency plans that suggested he'd been prepared for something like this. "You knew they were coming for you," she stated, rather than ask. Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I suspected. The other CEOs who were targeted, we were all working on the same classified project. A government contract that very few people knew about." "What kind of project?" "The kind that changes the balance of power," he said cryptically. "The kind that makes enemies." They emerged from the tunnel onto a quiet side street. 2 blocks later, as promised, Alexander directed her to pull into an automated parking garage. They switched to the motorcycle, with Sophia driving and Alexander as passenger. "Where to now?" she asked as they exited the garage. "First, we need to contact your roommate," Alexander said, surprising her. "The one who warned you about the gas? She's clearly got skills we need." "How did you—" "You looked at your phone right before the attack. Either you're psychic Or someone warned you? Given your background and the precision of the warning, I'm guessing it's someone with technical capabilities. The way you glanced at your apartment building earlier when Hayes picked you up suggested concern for someone still there. Sophia navigated through traffic, impressed despite herself. Her name is Mia. She's a cybersecurity specialist. Call her. Tell her to meet us, but make sure she's not followed. Sophia activated the comm unit in her helmet. Mia, it's me. I need your help. And yes, I'm with him. Mia's voice came through, tense but controlled, already packed and ready. They hit your apartment 10 minutes after you left. Professional team. 4 operatives. I got out through the maintenance shaft. Where do I meet you? Alexander leaned closer to speak into the comm. Miss Chen, this is Alexander Blackwood. There's a bookstore called Fitzgerald's on Carter Street. Go there, browse the poetry section for exactly 7 minutes, then exit through the back and wait in the alley. We'll find you. How do you know my last name? Mia demanded. The same way I know you used to work for the NSA before going private sector, Alexander replied smoothly. I do my homework. After disconnecting, Sophia shot him a look through her helmet visor. You've been investigating us. Of course I have. I investigate everyone who enters my orbit unexpectedly. He paused. Just as I'm sure you've been investigating me since the moment you recognized Vanessa's attempt. The accusation hung in the air between them, as Sophia maneuvered through the city streets, taking an indirect route to avoid potential surveillance. There's something you should know, she finally said. The phrase Vanessa left. The phoenix rises from the ashes. It's a calling card. I've seen it before. Attached to a classified operation from my time as an analyst. An operation codenamed Lazarus. Alexander tensed behind her. What was the objective of Lazarus? Regime change, Sophia replied grimly, but not in some distant country. Right here, a systematic elimination of key figures in the military-industrial complex to be replaced by operatives loyal to a shadow organization within our own government. And you think that's what this is, a coup? I think, Sophia said carefully, that whatever project you and those other CEOs were working on threatened someone powerful enough to revive a dormant Black Ops program. She paused at a red light. But the question is, what exactly were you building, Mr. Blackwood? Alexander's grip tightened on the motorcycle seat. Something that could expose every hidden operation, every secret deal, and every covert agent in the field. We called it Prometheus. Fitzgerald's bookstore was a 3-story haven of worn wooden shelves and the comforting scent of old paper. Sophia and Alexander entered separately, she through the front, browsing mystery novels, while he came in through the side entrance, disappearing into the history section. 7 minutes after Mia's arrival, they converged in the narrow alley behind the store. Mia looked different. Her usually unkempt hair now tucked beneath a cap, glasses replaced by contacts, dressed in nondescript clothing that would blend into any crowd. She carried a backpack that Sophia knew contained her mobile command center, a customized laptop with capabilities that skirted the edge of legality. You look terrible, Mia said by way of greeting, eyeing Sophia with concern. Nice to see you too, Sophia replied. Did you bring what I asked for? Mia nodded, handing over a small package, clean phone, encrypted. And I grabbed your emergency kit from the hidden panel before they trashed our place. She turned to Alexander, her expression hardening. So you're the billionaire who got my friend into this mess? Actually, Alexander replied evenly, I believe it's the other way around. Someone put your friend in my path deliberately. He glanced at his watch. We should move. This location won't be secure for long. They made their way through a maze of service alleys to a small, unmarked door that Alexander unlocked with a key code. Inside was a modest apartment with sparse furnishings and reinforced windows. One of my off-the-books properties, he explained as they entered, purchased through a shell corporation that can't be traced back to me. We should be safe here temporarily. Mia immediately set up her equipment on the kitchen counter. I need details. What exactly is Prometheus, and why is it worth killing for? Alexander hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. It's an AI-driven surveillance countermeasure system. In simple terms, it can detect and identify undercover operatives based on behavioral patterns, communication analyses, and micro-expressions, even through digital media. That's impossible, Mia scoffed. 3 years ago, yes, Alexander conceded. But we've made breakthroughs. The system can now identify deep cover agents with 97.8% accuracy, even when they themselves don't know they're sleepers. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. You're talking about Manchurian candidates, programmed operatives. Alexander nodded grimly. Precisely. Prometheus can identify neural programming markers through video analysis alone. It was developed for counterintelligence to expose foreign infiltration of our government and corporate structures. But it could also expose domestic black operations, Sophia added, the implications becoming clear, including programs like Lazarus. Exactly, Alexander confirmed, which is why certain elements within our own intelligence community want it buried, along with everyone who knows how it works. Mia's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'm scanning for any chatter related to Prometheus or Lazarus on secure channels. She paused, looking up. Wait, if this system is so revolutionary, why haven't I heard about it? I still have contacts in the community, because officially it doesn't exist, Alexander explained. The project was compartmentalized to an extreme degree. Only the 4 CEOs, our lead scientists, and our government liaison knew the full scope. Everyone else worked on isolated components without understanding the complete system. And who was the liaison? Sophia asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Alexander's expression darkened. Director Malcolm Wells, head of the Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Collections Service. Sophia exchanged a knowing look with Mia. Wells was my superior during my time as an analyst. He's the one I had ethical disagreements with. What kind of disagreements? Alexander pressed. Sophia hesitated before answering. He wanted to use intelligence assets for domestic surveillance beyond what was legally authorized. I objected and documented my concerns through proper channels. 3 weeks later, I was facing fabricated corruption charges. I resigned before they could build a case. And Mia? How does she fit into this? I was NSA, Mia explained, not looking up from her screen. I specialized in identifying patterns in digital communications that indicated sleeper cells or deep cover operatives. When Sophia was targeted, I helped her disappear. Been watching her back ever since. Alexander processed this information, his expression thoughtful. So you both have expertise relevant to Prometheus. That can't be coincidental. It's not, Sophia confirmed. Someone wanted me in that restaurant last night. The question is, who, Wells or someone else? Mia suddenly straightened. I've got something. Encrypted communication between a DIA server and a private network. They're discussing cleanup at Le Ciel and secondary targets. There's a list of names. Yours is on it, Sophia. And mine, I assume, Alexander said grimly. Yes, but there are others. Dr. Elena Voronin, Professor James Wayland, and someone referred to only as Architect. Alexander's face paled. Voronin and Wayland were the lead scientists on Prometheus, but Architect, that's a designation I don't recognize. Sophia moved to look over Mia's shoulder. Can you trace the private network? Working on it, Mia replied. It's bouncing through multiple proxies, but there's a pattern to the routing algorithm. Give me time. Alexander's phone buzzed, a secure line that only a handful of people had access to. He checked the caller ID and frowned. It's Hayes. He put the call on speaker. Sir, Hayes's voice came through, tense and breathless. Genevieve is dead. Sniper took her when we switched vehicles. I'm compromised and being pursued. Do not trust Director Wells. I repeat, Wells is involved. Where are you? Alexander demanded. Heading east on... The call cut off abruptly, replaced by static. The three exchanged grim looks. Wells is cleaning house, Sophia said quietly. Anyone connected to Prometheus is a target, which means we need to find the other scientists before they do. Alexander replied. He turned to Mia. Can you locate Voronin and Wayland? Already on it, Mia confirmed. Voronin's last known location was a research facility in Colorado. Wayland teaches at MIT, but according to his calendar, he's on sabbatical. No digital footprint for the past 3 weeks. They've gone dark, Sophia surmised. Smart move. Alexander paced the small apartment. We need leverage. Something to stop Wells from coming after us. We need Prometheus. Sophia stated. The actual system, if it works as you claim, we could use it to identify everyone involved in Lazarus. The only working prototype is in a secure facility, Alexander said. Heavily guarded, biometric access only. Your biometrics? Mia asked. Mine and the other CEOs. Any one of us could access it. Sophia considered their options. And so we need to get you to this facility without being detected by an intelligence agency with virtually unlimited resources. Not just me, Alexander corrected. Us. Prometheus requires specific expertise to operate. I understand the hardware architecture, but not the algorithmic components. That's where Voronin and Wayland come in. And without them, Sophia pressed. Alexander looked at her meaningfully. Well, we'd need someone with experience in behavioral analysis and pattern recognition. Someone with intelligence training. The implication was clear. You want me to help you operate Prometheus? I think, Alexander replied carefully. That's exactly why you were positioned at Le Ciel last night, not just to save me, but to be brought into this. The question is, by whom and to what end? Mia's computer pinged. I've got it. The private network communicating with the DIA server. It's routing through a front company called Phoenix Analytics. Phoenix, Sophia repeated. The Phoenix rises from the ashes. It gets better, Mia continued. Guess who owns Phoenix Analytics? A holding company controlled by Senator James Harrington, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Alexander said, his expression grim. The same committee that authorized funding for Prometheus. This goes higher than Wells, Sophia realized. He's just an operative. Harrington is using Lazarus to eliminate anyone who knows about Prometheus. Then he'll likely repurpose it for his own agenda, which is... Mia asked. Alexander's answer was chilling in its simplicity. Control. Absolute, unquestioned control over who holds power in this country. Dawn broke over the city, casting long shadows through the apartment's reinforced windows. Sophia hadn't slept, her mind racing with the implications of what they'd discovered. Senator Harrington, a man positioned to potentially run for president in the next election cycle, orchestrating assassinations of American citizens on American soil. It was beyond a scandal. It was treason. Alexander had finally dozed off on the sofa, the weight of the past 24 hours temporarily lifting from his shoulders. Mia remained hunched over her laptop, eyes red-rimmed but alert, following digital breadcrumbs through the labyrinth of classified networks. I've located Voronin, Mia announced quietly, careful not to wake Alexander. She's using a secure protocol I helped design years ago, meant for intelligence assets who've been compromised. She's reaching out. Sophia moved to her side. What's she saying? She knows about the other CEOs. She's been monitoring the situation from a secure location. Mia looked up. She wants to make contact, but only with you specifically. Me? She doesn't even know me. Apparently she does, Mia replied, turning the screen to show a message. Tell analyst Reeves that Lazarus is only phase 1. Firebird is phase 2. She'll understand the reference. Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. Firebird, she whispered. That was theoretical, a hypothetical scenario we gamed out at the agency, a systematic replacement of key government positions with programmed operatives. We determined it was practically impossible because there was no reliable way to identify existing deep cover agents to replace them. Until Prometheus, Mia concluded, the pieces falling into place. Harrington isn't trying to destroy Prometheus. He's trying to control it. Alexander stirred, immediately alert in the way of someone accustomed to making critical decisions on minimal sleep. What have I missed? They quickly brought him up to speed. His expression darkened with each new revelation. The facility housing Prometheus is in Northern Virginia, Alexander said. Officially, it's a data storage center for my company's cloud computing division. In reality, it's a black site, jointly operated with the Defense Department, which means it's likely compromised if Wells is involved, Sophia noted. Alexander shook his head. Not necessarily. The security protocols were designed specifically to prevent unilateral access by any one agency or entity. Multiple simultaneous authentications are required, biometric, cryptographic, and physical keys held by different parties. So even Wells couldn't access it alone. Mia said. Exactly. He'd need me, or one of the other CEOs, plus a representative from the Oversight Committee, like Senator Harrington, Sophia concluded grimly. Alexander nodded, which explains why they need me alive, at least until they can access the system. That doesn't explain why they tried to poison you at the restaurant, Mia pointed out. Vanessa wasn't working for them. Sophia realized she was exactly what she appeared to be, a grieving daughter seeking revenge. They just capitalized on her attempt after it failed. Using it as cover to initiate Lazarus, Alexander agreed. The timeline fits. The attacks on the other CEOs began after Vanessa was apprehended. A notification chimed on Mia's laptop. Voronin wants a video call. Secure channel. Bounce through 17 proxy servers. Should I accept? Alexander and Sophia exchanged looks before nodding. The screen flickered, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel grey hair pulled into a tight bun. Her sharp features were accentuated by rectangular glasses, behind which intelligent eyes assessed them with clinical precision. Mr. Blackwood, she acknowledged. You look terrible. Dr. Voronin, Alexander replied. Circumstances have been less than ideal. Indeed. Her accent was barely perceptible, Russian, softened by decades in America. I see you found analyst Reeves. Good. She was always the contingency. Sophia stepped forward. What do you mean, though, the contingency? Your placement at Le Ciel wasn't an accident, Voronin confirmed, but neither was it Harrington's doing. It was mine. The revelation hung in the air for a moment before Voronin continued. When we designed Prometheus, we knew its potential for misuse. So we built in safeguards, including a hidden protocol that would identify attempts to repurpose the system. When Senator Harrington began showing unusual interest in the operational details, we activated our contingency plan. You used me, Sophia said, her voice flat. I recruited you, Voronin corrected, through intermediaries. Your former supervisor at the university, Professor Chen, Mia's cousin, if I'm not mistaken. Mia looked stunned. Marcus set this up. He's been feeding you information about us. Only what was necessary, Voronin replied unapologetically. We needed someone with Ms. Reeves' specific skill set who also had reason to distrust the intelligence establishment. Someone who would act on instinct when the moment came. The moment at the restaurant, Alexander surmised. But you knew about Vanessa's plan. We had intercepted communications suggesting an attempt on your life. The timing aligned with Harrington's increasing pressure to gain access to Prometheus. It presented a perfect opportunity to bring Ms. Reeves into your orbit naturally. Sophia felt manipulated, used, but she couldn't argue with the effectiveness of the strategy. Where's Wayland? Voronin's expression tightened. Missing. He was supposed to rendezvous with me 3 days ago. His last communication indicated he had critical information about modifications made to Prometheus without our knowledge. What kind of modifications? Alexander demanded. Unknown, but they were implemented during the last maintenance cycle, which was overseen by Director Wells. Personally, the implications were chilling. If Wells had altered Prometheus, the system they were fighting to protect might already be compromised. We need to access the facility, Sophia stated. Verify the system's integrity before anyone else can get to it. Agreed, Voronin said. But the facility will be watched. Any approach using standard access protocols will alert Harrington's people. Then we don't use standard protocols, Alexander replied. There's a maintenance tunnel, part of the original construction, sealed off during security upgrades. It doesn't appear on any current schematics. How do you know about it? Mia asked skeptically. Because I insisted it be preserved as an emergency exit. Only myself and Hayes knew about it. His expression darkened at the mention of his security chief, whose fate remained unknown. Even if we can access the facility, Sophia pointed out, we still need to authenticate the system. That requires multiple authorization. Not necessarily, Voronin interjected. Wayland and I built a backdoor, an emergency access protocol, in case the system was ever compromised from within. It requires physical presence at the main terminal and a specific authentication sequence, which you can provide, Alexander concluded. Which Ms. Reeves can provide, Voronin corrected. The authentication sequence is based on the Firebird protocol she helped develop. It's not something that can be explained or written down. It requires specific cognitive patterns that Prometheus is programmed to recognize. Sophia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. And you built a backdoor that only I can access without ever telling me about it. Security through obscurity, Voronin said simply. Even Wayland doesn't know the full sequence. Neither do I. We each know parts, and the system recognizes the unique cognitive patterns of authorized users, like a mental fingerprint, Mia mused. Precisely, and Ms. Reeves has exactly the right print. Alexander checked his watch. If we're going to do this, it needs to be tonight. Security rotations change at midnight, creating a brief window where monitoring systems switch over. I'll guide you remotely, Voronin agreed. But be warned, if Wells has indeed modified the system, there's no telling what safeguards he may have implemented. As the call ended, Sophia turned to Alexander. You realize we're likely walking into a trap. Almost certainly, he agreed. But we're out of options. If Harrington gains control of Prometheus, he'll have the power to identify and eliminate anyone who might oppose him, while simultaneously positioning his own operatives in their place. The perfect silent coup, Mia concluded. No assassinations, no public battles, just a gradual, invisible replacement of the power structure. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm, oblivious to the conspiracy unfolding in its midst. Sophia moved to the window, watching people go about their daily lives. Lives that would be fundamentally altered if they failed tonight. But I was just trying to get through my shift, she murmured, remembering how simple everything had seemed before she knocked that champagne flute from Alexander's hand. Just trying to pay for my classes, and I was just trying to build a better security system, Alexander replied, joining her at the window. Funny how things spiral beyond our control. Their reflection in the glass showed two people who, 24 hours earlier, had occupied entirely different worlds. Now, improbably, they were all that stood between democracy and its invisible undoing. Nightfall brought a steady rain that washed the city streets in reflected neon. It was the kind of weather Sophia had always appreciated for its anonymity, the way it encouraged people to hurry along with heads down, paying little attention to those around them. Tonight, that natural camouflage might save their lives. In the apartment's small bathroom, Sophia studied her reflection as she applied a dark shade of lipstick, not for vanity, but for transformation. The woman staring back at her was no longer the waitress who had knocked a poisoned drink from a billionaire's hand, nor was she the diligent forensic science student. She was reverting to a version of herself she'd thought she'd left behind, the intelligence analyst who knew how to disappear in plain sight. You look different, Alexander observed when she emerged. He too had transformed, trading his executive appearance for nondescript clothing that would blend into the maintenance staff at the facility. Dark pants, navy shirt, work boots. That's the point, she replied, tucking a small canister into her boot, a chemical countermeasure she'd prepared using supplies from her emergency kit. In this line of work, being remembered gets you killed. Mia looked up from her workstation. Undo satellite imagery shows normal activity at the facility. Security protocols appear unchanged. If they're expecting us, they're not showing it. They won't, Sophia said grimly. Wells is too smart for that. He'll maintain standard operations to avoid tipping his hand. Alexander checked his watch. Our window opens in 3 hours. Once we're inside, we'll have approximately 20 minutes to access the system before the security reset completes. And if we're not out by then? Mia asked, though she already knew the answer. Then we're trapped, Alexander replied matter-of-factly. The facility goes into automatic lockdown during reset completion. Nothing gets in or out until morning security verification. Sophia had been reviewing the facility blueprints Alexander had provided. Tell me about this maintenance tunnel. Why wasn't it sealed completely during the upgrades? Because I insisted it remain accessible as a failsafe, Alexander explained. Official security protocols are designed to prevent unauthorized access, but they can also prevent escape in an emergency. After what happened at the Wayland Institute fire 5 years ago, where 3 researchers died because security lockdowns prevented evacuation. I refuse to create a potential death trap. Smart, Sophia acknowledged, but it also creates a vulnerability that Wells might be aware of, especially if Hayes has been compromised. Alexander's expression darkened at the mention of his security chief. Hayes has been with me for 7 years. She saved my life twice. If she's been turned, it wasn't willingly. Sometimes the most loyal are the most vulnerable, Sophia said quietly. They don't see betrayal coming until it's too late. The statement hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of personal experience. Mia gave Sophia a knowing look, but said nothing. Before we leave, Alexander said, changing the subject, there's something I need to show you. He removed what appeared to be a standard wristwatch and placed it on the table. This is more than it seems. With practiced precision, he manipulated the watch's bezel and crown simultaneously. The face slid aside, revealing a small compartment containing what looked like a memory chip. This is the master encryption key for Prometheus, he explained. One of only 4 in existence. The system was designed so that at least 2 keys are required for full access. The others are held by the other CEOs, 2 of whom are now dead. And the 4th, Sophia asked. With Wayland, Wells and Harrington don't know about this failsafe. Even if they capture us, they'll need this key, along with either Wayland's or the one held by Takashi Yamamoto, the only other surviving CEO, currently in Japan, under heavy protection. Sophia understood the implication. You're telling me that if we're captured, I should destroy it? Alexander nodded grimly. Without hesitation, as they made final preparations, Mia established secure communications and remote access to the facility's peripheral systems. Not enough to control security directly, but enough to monitor patterns and possibly create diversions if needed. I still don't understand one thing, Mia said as she worked. Why you, Sophia? Why build a backdoor specifically keyed to your cognitive patterns? Sophia had been wondering the same thing. Dr. Voronin, she called through the video link they'd maintained. Care to explain? Voronin's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but resolute. Because you were there at the beginning, Miss Reeves, though you didn't know it. The foundational algorithm for Prometheus, the one that identifies deception patterns in micro-expressions, was built using your analytical models from the Firebird protocol. That's not possible, Sophia objected. Those models were theoretical. I never completed them, but I did. Came a new voice from off-screen. A moment later, a man stepped into view beside Voronin, tall, thin, with a professor's disheveled appearance despite his expensive clothing. Using your original framework, Professor Wayland, Alexander breathed, visibly relieved. You're alive. Barely, Wayland replied. I've been in hiding since I discovered what Wells did to Prometheus. The modifications weren't just to gain control, they were to fundamentally alter its purpose. How? Alexander demanded. He inverted the identification protocol, Wayland explained, his voice tense with urgency. Prometheus was designed to identify deep-cover operatives by their behavioral inconsistencies. Wells reprogrammed it to identify potential resistors, people whose psychological profiles suggest they would oppose authoritarian control. The implications struck them all simultaneously. It wasn't just about identifying existing agents. It was about preemptively identifying and neutralizing anyone who might resist. A predictive purge, Sophia whispered, horrified. Minority Report made real. Precisely, Wayland confirmed. And the list it's already generated includes military officers, intelligence officials, journalists, activists. Anyone with both the inclination and capability to oppose what's coming. How long do we have? Alexander asked. The system is scheduled for full implementation in 36 hours, Voronin replied. Once activated, it will transmit its targets list to specially designated Lazarus team. Sophia felt cold determination replacing her fear. This was no longer about self-preservation. It was about preventing a fundamental subversion of democracy itself. There's one more thing you should know, Wayland added, his expression grave. The cognitive pattern recognition that forms Prometheus's core, it works in both directions. It doesn't just allow the system to identify specific behavioral markers. It allows those who understand its architecture to influence behavior predictively. What are you saying? Mia asked. "I'm saying," Wayland replied carefully, "that your presence at Le Ciel wasn't just orchestrated by us. Your specific reaction, the way you intervened to save Alexander, was predicted by Prometheus itself with 98.7% accuracy." Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. "You're telling me my actions weren't my own, that I was manipulated into behaving exactly as predicted." "Not manipulated," Voronin corrected, "anticipated. Your training, your ethical framework, your instinctive responses, they're consistent enough to be predictable under specific circumstances. That's why you were the perfect choice for the cognitive key. Because I'm predictable." The thought was unsettling. "Because you're consistent," Alexander interjected, understanding dawning in his eyes. "It's because, when faced with a clear moral choice between action and inaction, you will always choose action, even at personal cost. That's not manipulation, it's character." The distinction offered little comfort. Sophia had spent her career analyzing patterns, identifying predictive behaviors. Being on the other side of that equation, being the one whose actions were anticipated and counted on, felt like a violation of her agency. "And do we need to move?" she said finally, pushing personal concerns aside. "The clock is ticking." As they prepared to leave, Alexander placed a hand on her shoulder. "For what it's worth, I'm grateful your predictable character put you in that restaurant last night. Not just because you saved my life, but because it means you're exactly who we need right now." The Prometheus facility loomed against the night sky like a fortress disguised as an office building, all clean lines and reflective glass that revealed nothing of its true purpose. From their vantage point in a maintenance van parked 3 blocks away, Sophia studied the perimeter through night vision binoculars, while Alexander reviewed the entry plan one final time. "The tunnel access is here," he said, pointing to a spot on the digital blueprint displayed on a tablet. "It's beneath a drainage grate in the southeast corner of the property, obscured by landscaping. Once inside, we'll need to navigate approximately 200 meters of tunnel before reaching the sub-level access point." "Security cameras?" Sophia asked, still scanning the building's exterior. "Standard coverage on the approach," Alexander replied, "but Mia should be able to loop the feed for the 60 seconds we'll need to access the tunnel entrance." On cue, Mia's voice came through their earpieces. "I'm in their peripheral systems. Ready when you are. You'll have exactly 1 minute from my mark." Sophia lowered the binoculars, her expression troubled. "It's too quiet. Normal facilities have maintenance staff, security patrols. I've seen 2 guards change positions in 30 minutes. The primary security is automated," Alexander explained. "Biometric scanners, motion sensors, heat mapping. Human guards are mainly for show and to respond if the automated systems are triggered, which means Wells would have had to compromise the automated systems to set a trap," Sophia concluded. "Can he do that?" "Not without leaving evidence in the logs," Alexander assured her, "and Mia would have detected that, unless they're expecting us to access those logs," Mia countered through the comm. "And in which case, they might have created a false trail showing normal operations." The 3 fell silent, each weighing the risks against the increasingly dire consequences of inaction. "We don't have a choice," Sophia finally said. 36 hours until Prometheus activates. We move now, or we might as well surrender." Alexander nodded, his face set with determination. "Mia, initiate the camera loop on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Cameras looping. You have 60 seconds. They moved with practiced efficiency, 2 shadows slipping across the rain-slick pavement, keeping to the darker patches between streetlights. The landscaping around the building was minimalist by design, offering little cover but also requiring minimal maintenance, which meant fewer reasons for random personnel to be in the area where the tunnel entrance was located. Sophia reached the drainage grate first, her fingers finding the hidden release mechanism Alexander had described. The grate slid aside with surprising ease, revealing a narrow shaft with metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall. 40 seconds, Mia's voice warned in their ears. Alexander descended first, with Sophia following and securing the grate above them. The shaft dropped about 20 feet before opening into a horizontal tunnel, narrow but tall enough to stand in. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim blue glow. "We're in," Sophia whispered. "Cameras back to normal." Mia confirmed. No alarms triggered, proceeding to Phase 2 peripheral system monitoring. They moved quickly but cautiously along the tunnel, their footsteps echoing despite their efforts to remain silent. Sophia found herself increasingly uneasy with each step. Years of training had honed her instincts, and every nerve in her body was screaming that something wasn't right. "Alexander," she whispered, "this tunnel. It's too clean." He paused, glancing back at her. "What do you mean?" "Emergency access points that haven't been used in years should show signs of neglect, dust, cobwebs, maybe even minor water damage. This looks maintained." Alexander's expression tightened as he examined their surroundings more carefully. "You're right. Someone's been using this route." "Wells," she suggested. "Maybe. Or Hayes." His voice caught slightly on his security chief's name. "Either way, we need to assume our approach is compromised." They continued forward with heightened caution, checking for surveillance devices or tripwires. The tunnel eventually ended at what appeared to be a solid wall, but Alexander located a hidden panel concealing a biometric scanner. "This will register my access," he warned. "Once I activate it, the system will know we're here. We'll have approximately 2 minutes before security protocols require human verification of the unusual entry point." Sophia nodded, readying herself for what would come next. "Would they do it?" Alexander placed his palm against the scanner. A soft blue light pulsed beneath his hand, followed by a muted beep of confirmation. The wall slid open, revealing a utility corridor that served the facility's lower level. "We're in," he confirmed to Mia through the comm. "Beginning Phase 3, monitoring security responses," Mia replied. "No immediate alerts, but there's increased data traffic on their internal network. They know something's happening." The corridor led them past mechanical rooms housing the building's climate control systems, backup generators, and water purification equipment. At the far end, a heavy security door marked the transition from maintenance areas to the secure sections of the facility. "This requires dual authentication," Alexander explained, approaching the door. "Retinal scan plus code entry. The code changes every 6 hours. Do you have today's code?" Sophia asked. "I always have the codes," he replied, a hint of grim humor in his voice. "CEO privilege." As he leaned toward the retinal scanner, Sophia caught a flicker of movement on a security monitor mounted near the door, a reflection that shouldn't have been there. Instinct took over. She grabbed Alexander and pulled him back just as the distinctive crack of a high-velocity round echoed through the corridor. The bullet impacted where his head had been moments before. "Sniper!" she hissed, dragging him behind a large pipe junction that offered momentary cover. "They were waiting for us." Alexander pressed a hand to his ear. "Mia, we're compromised. Active shooter in the facility." Static was the only response. "They're jamming our comms," Sophia realized. "We're on our own." Alexander's expression hardened. "There's another way in. Service elevator shaft. It bypasses this section entirely." They moved quickly, staying low and using the maze of pipes and equipment for cover. 2 more shots rang out, uncomfortably close, forcing them to change direction. The shooter was herding them, Sophia realized, driving them away from both their original entry point and the main access door. "Alexander," she whispered urgently as they crouched behind an electrical panel. "This isn't random. They're directing our movement. We're being channeled." His eyes met hers, understanding dawning. "Into a trap." "Exactly. Which means we need to do the unexpected." She quickly surveyed their surroundings, formulating a plan. "The ventilation system. There." She pointed to a large duct overhead. "It should connect to the main system room. All data centers have aggressive cooling requirements." "It's too obvious," Alexander objected. "They'll expect that, which is why we make them think that's our plan, while actually doing something else." Sophia reached into her boot and retrieved the small canister she'd prepared earlier. "This is a compound that mimics human heat signatures when it reacts with air. We send it through the vent, making them think we're using that route, while we double back to the main entrance." Alexander nodded appreciatively, creating a diversion. "But the main entrance still requires retinal authentication. With a sniper watching, I'll be exposed. Not if they're focused on the false heat signatures." Sophia activated the canister and carefully placed it inside the vent. "This will buy us maybe 2 minutes before they realize it's a decoy." They retraced their steps, moving with silent urgency. As they approached the main security door again, Alexander retrieved a small device from his pocket. Retinal scanner spoofing device, he explained, attaching it to the scanner. It projects a stored image of my retinal pattern. Not perfect, but it might work if their systems are focused elsewhere. The device hummed softly, projecting the pattern into the scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the security panel flashed green and the heavy door slid open. "We have access," Alexander whispered triumphantly. "Now we find Prometheus before they find us." Beyond the security door lay the heart of the facility, a labyrinth of server rooms and research spaces, bathed in the cool blue glow of emergency lighting. The main power had been diverted to essential systems only, a standard security protocol during a potential breach. It worked to their advantage, creating shadows where they could move undetected. Prometheus is housed in a specialized containment chamber, Alexander whispered as they moved down a corridor. Isolated network, dedicated power supply, temperature-controlled environment. Third sublevel, northwest quadrant. Sophia checked her watch. "We have 15 minutes before security reset completes." "How far?" "2 more levels down. There's a restricted elevator at the end of this corridor." They advanced cautiously, alert for any sign of the sniper. The facility seemed eerily deserted. No security personnel, no technicians, no signs of the usual activity that should be present even during night operations. "It's a skeleton crew," Alexander realized. "They've cleared the building of non-essential personnel, which means everyone still here is either compromised or part of Wells' team," Sophia concluded grimly. They reached the elevator, and Alexander used his access card. Nothing happened. "They've locked down the elevator systems," he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "We'll need to use the emergency stairs." As they located the stairwell access, a distant alarm began to sound. 3 short bursts, followed by a longer tone, repeating continuously. "What is that?" Sophia asked. "Biohazard warning," Alexander replied, his expression darkening. "They're flooding the lower levels with a chemical agent." "A dead man's switch," Sophia realized. "If they can't have Prometheus, no one can." "There are fail-safes. The core systems are in sealed environments with independent air supplies, but it means they know exactly where we're heading." They descended the emergency stairs rapidly, the alarm growing louder with each level. At the 3rd sublevel, they found the access door sealed, standard protocol during a biohazard event. "Manual override," Alexander said, moving to a keypad beside the door. My authentication should still work, unless they've completely wiped me from the system." He entered a complex sequence, then placed his palm on the scanner. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the panel flashed green, and the door released with a hydraulic hiss. "Air seems clear," Sophia observed as they entered the corridor. "Whatever they released either hasn't reached this section or was a bluff." "Don't count on it," Alexander warned. "Standard procedure is to seal contaminated sections to prevent spread. This area might be clean now, but..." He was interrupted by the sound of rapid footsteps approaching from a connecting hallway. They ducked into an alcove housing emergency equipment, pressing themselves against the wall as the footsteps grew closer. A figure in tactical gear rushed past their position, then abruptly halted and backtracked. Sophia tensed, preparing for confrontation, then froze as she recognized the face behind the protective mask. "Hayes," Alexander breathed, equal parts relief and wariness evident in his voice. Alexander's security chief pulled down her mask, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and urgency. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "Would the entire facility is compromised?" "We know," Alexander replied carefully, not yet moving from their concealed position. "Wells is working with Senator Harrington. They've modified Prometheus." Hayes nodded grimly. "It's worse than that. They've activated a variant of the system already. It's running a preliminary target acquisition sequence." "How did you escape?" Sophia asked, her suspicion evident. "Last we heard, you were being pursued after Genevieve was killed." "I wasn't their primary target," Hayes explained. "Once they confirmed Alexander wasn't with me, they left me for the cleanup team. Sloppy. I've been here for hours, trying to access Prometheus without triggering the fail-safes." Sophia and Alexander exchanged skeptical glances. This could easily be a trap. "Prove you're not compromised," Alexander demanded. Hayes didn't hesitate. The first time I saved your life was in Singapore, 2018. You were allergic to the shellfish in the Laksa. The second was in Zurich, when your private plane was sabotaged. Neither incident was ever reported publicly. Alexander visibly relaxed, but Sophia remained wary. That doesn't prove you haven't been turned since then. Hayes fixed her with a steely gaze. Fair enough, but right now, we have bigger problems. Wells has a team of 8 operatives in the building, all ex-special forces. They're sweeping level by level, and Senator Harrington himself is here in the Prometheus chamber. Harrington is here personally, Alexander asked, surprised. That's a significant risk for someone in his position. He needs direct access to complete the final authorization, Hayes explained. The modified system requires his biometric signature to activate fully. This aligned with what they already knew. Sophia made a decision. We need to reach Prometheus before the activation sequence completes. How much time do we have? Less than 10 minutes, Hayes replied. They accelerated the timeline when they detected your entry. Can you get us there undetected? Alexander asked. Hayes nodded. Service corridors. Maintenance uses them to access the cooling systems for the server rooms. They're not on the main security grid. They followed Hayes through a series of increasingly narrow passages, the ambient temperature dropping noticeably as they approached the server farm that housed Prometheus. The hum of cooling equipment grew louder, occasionally punctuated by the distant sound of the biohazard alarm. Something's not right, Sophia whispered to Alexander as they navigated a particularly tight section. Why would Harrington be here personally? The risk is too great. Because he needs to witness it, Alexander replied grimly. Prometheus isn't just a tool for him, it's his legacy, the ultimate mechanism of control. Hayes halted at a junction, raising a hand in warning. 2 guards ahead, outside the main access point to the Prometheus chamber. Can we bypass them? Sophia asked. Hayes pointed to a narrow utility shaft above them. This runs directly into the environmental control room adjacent to the main chamber. It's tight, but navigable. Alexander studied the shaft dubiously. Once we're in the environmental control room, how do we access the main chamber? It'll be sealed and guarded. I have access to the environmental systems, Hayes explained. I can trigger a cooling malfunction. Standard protocol requires immediate response to prevent damage to the quantum processors. When they open the chamber to investigate, we move in. The plan was risky but plausible. They climbed into the utility shaft, crawling in single file through the claustrophobic space. The metal was cold against their hands and knees, and every sound seemed magnified in the confined space. As they neared the end of the shaft, Hayes suddenly stopped. Wait, she whispered. Something's wrong. The environmental control room should be active. Monitors, equipment running. It's dark. Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It's a trap. Before they could retreat, the section of shaft beneath them gave way, sending all 3 plummeting into darkness. Sophia landed hard on a padded surface, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Emergency lights activated, illuminating a sealed room with no visible exits. Standing before them, flanked by armed guards, was Senator James Harrington, his aristocratic features set in a cold smile. Mr. Blackwood, he greeted, as if welcoming Alexander to a board meeting rather than a trap. How good of you to join us. And Ms. Reeves, or should I say Analyst Reeves, your predictable heroics have saved me considerable trouble. Hayes struggled to her feet, reaching for a weapon that was no longer there. You won't get away with this, Senator. My dear Ms. Hayes, Harrington replied, his smile widening. I already have. In fact, I couldn't have done it without your assistance. The betrayal Sophia had been anticipating came from an unexpected direction, as Harrington turned to Hayes and added, "Well done, Agent. Your performance was flawless." The revelation struck like a physical blow. Sophia turned to Hayes, searching for any sign of remorse or conflict in the security chief's expression. There was none. Only the cold efficiency of someone who had been playing a role all along. You never escaped. Alexander said quietly, the betrayal evident in his voice. There was no sniper attack on Genevieve. You killed her. Hayes shrugged, the gesture almost casual. Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. Genevieve was loyal to you personally. She would have been a problem. Senator Harrington stepped forward, every inch the powerful politician, even in this underground facility. His tailored suit seemed incongruous against the tactical gear of his security team, but his bearing made it clear who commanded the room. I must admit, Mr. Blackwood, when we first conceptualized Prometheus, I was genuinely impressed by your vision, Harrington said, his tone conversational. A system that could identify deep cover operatives through behavioral analysis. Truly revolutionary. But you and your colleagues were thinking too small, and what you're doing is illegal, Alexander replied, his composure returning despite their dire situation. Using a classified defense system for domestic surveillance violates at least 6 federal statutes. Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. Laws are tools, Mr. Blackwood. They serve their purpose until a better tool comes along. Prometheus is that better tool, a way to identify not just who is working against American interests, but who might work against them in the future. Thought crime, Sophia interjected. You're talking about predictive prosecution, targeting people for what they might do rather than what they've done. I prefer to call it preventative security, Harrington corrected smoothly. And really, Ms. Reeves, you of all people should appreciate the concept. After all, wasn't that exactly what you did at Le Ciel? You acted based on your prediction of what was about to happen. The comparison made Sophia's skin crawl. That's different. I witnessed an actual attempt in progress, and Prometheus witnesses patterns of behavior that, with 98.7% accuracy, predict seditious activity, Harrington countered. The principle is the same, only the scale differs. Alexander took a step forward, only to be blocked by one of the armed guards. Where's Director Wells? I assumed he'd want to be here for his moment of triumph. A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed Harrington's face. Director Wells has been reassigned. His usefulness ended when he secured access to the facility. Hayes moved to stand beside Harrington. Wells was a liability. Too many personal connections to potential targets. Too many conflicting loyalties. Unlike you, Alexander said bitterly. Unlike me, Hayes agreed without emotion. I understand what's at stake. The world is changing, Alexander. Traditional governance is failing. We need a new approach, one that anticipates threats before they materialize. Sophia studied their surroundings, looking for any potential escape route or advantage. The room appeared to be a security holding area, likely used for containing intruders until they could be processed. No windows, one visible door, heavily reinforced, and undoubtedly guarded on the other side as well. You won't get away with this, she said, stalling for time as she continued to assess their options. Dr. Voronin and Professor Wayland know what you're doing. They've already alerted others. Ah yes, our missing scientists, Harrington said, glancing at his watch. Their continued absence has been inconvenient, but not insurmountable. We've managed to complete the necessary modifications without them. Alexander's expression hardened. You're forgetting one thing, Senator. Prometheus requires multiple authentication keys to fully activate. Keys that only I and the other CEOs possess. For the first time, Harrington's confident demeanor showed a crack. Yes, that particular failsafe has proven challenging to circumvent, which is precisely why you're here, Mr. Blackwood. He nodded to one of the guards. Search him. As the guard approached, Alexander locked eyes with Sophia, a silent message passing between them. She understood immediately. He didn't have the key on him. Somewhere in their journey to the facility, he had hidden or disposed of it. The guard's search confirmed this, much to Harrington's visible frustration. Where is it? He demanded. Not here, Alexander replied calmly, and not anywhere you'll find it without me. Intelligent precaution, wouldn't you say? Harrington's facade of civility began to crumble. I don't think you appreciate the gravity of your situation, Mr. Blackwood. We don't need your cooperation to access your biometrics. My biometrics are only part of the authentication, Alexander countered. The physical key contains a quantum encryption signature that changes every 30 seconds. Without it, you can torture me all you want. You still won't get access. Hayes stepped forward. He's telling the truth, Senator. The system was designed specifically to prevent coerced access. Even with all his biometric markers, without the physical key, Prometheus will detect the anomaly and initiate a complete system purge. Harrington's jaw tightened as he considered this information. Then it seems we have a negotiation on our hands. I'm not interested in negotiating, Alexander stated firmly. Perhaps not for yourself, Harrington conceded, but what about for Ms. Reeves here, or for your daughter, Emily, currently in her sophomore year at Princeton, if I'm not mistaken. Alexander's composure slipped for the first time, raw fury flashing across his face. If you so much as— Please, Harrington interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. Let's not descend into melodramatics. No harm will come to your daughter if you cooperate. You have my word. The word of a man planning to subvert American democracy, Sophia interjected, and not exactly reassuring. Harrington turned his attention to her, his expression calculating. You continue to misunderstand our purpose, Ms. Reeves. We're not subverting democracy, we're preserving it by identifying and neutralizing threats before they can destabilize our institution, by creating an all-seeing surveillance state that targets citizens for their potential actions rather than actual crimes. Sophia countered. Oh, that's not preservation, it's perversion. An interesting perspective from someone whose entire career was built on predictive analysis, Hayes remarked coldly. How many operations did you support based on behavioral predictions? Analyst Reeves. How many targets were neutralized because of patterns you identified? The accusation struck uncomfortably close to home. It was precisely this moral ambiguity that had led Sophia to leave the intelligence community. The difference, she replied carefully, is consent and oversight. Intelligence operations target specific threats based on evidence, with judicial and congressional oversight. What you're building has none of those safeguards, because those very safeguards have become compromised, Harrington insisted, his voice rising with conviction. A foreign influence, corporate interests, ideological extremism, they've all infiltrated our oversight mechanisms. Prometheus bypasses those compromised systems to protect the fundamental integrity of our nation. Alexander shook his head. You've convinced yourself you're the hero of this story, Senator. That's what makes you so dangerous. A soft beep from Hayes's tactical gear interrupted the exchange. She checked a small device attached to her wrist, then addressed Harrington. Sir, we have a security breach on the eastern perimeter. Multiple intruders. Harrington frowned. Voronin. Unknown, Hayes replied, but the pattern suggests a coordinated team. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the senator's face. Secure them here, he ordered, gesturing to Alexander and Sophia. Deal with the intruders, then report back. We need that key. As Hayes and most of the security team exited, leaving only 2 guards with Harrington, Sophia caught Alexander's eye again. Something had changed in his expression, a subtle shift from despair to calculation. It won't work, you know, he said to Harrington once Hayes had left. Even if you get the key, even if you activate Prometheus, there's another failsafe you don't know about. Another of your technological tricks, Harrington asked dismissively, though Sophia detected a note of concern beneath his confidence. Not technological, Alexander replied. Human. Prometheus has a cognitive recognition pattern built into its core architecture. It can only be fully activated by someone with a specific neural signature, someone whose brain patterns match those used to create the original algorithm. Harrington's eyes narrowed. Wayland. Not just Wayland, Alexander corrected. There's a second cognitive key, someone whose analytical frameworks formed the basis of Prometheus's predictive engine. Both men turned to look at Sophia, whose mind was racing as she processed this new information. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Why Voronin had positioned her at Le Ciel, why her specific background made her crucial to this moment. Me, she said quietly. I'm the cognitive key. Harrington's expression shifted from frustration to calculating interest as he studied Sophia with new eyes. The waitress is the key, he murmured. almost to himself. Of course, that explains why Voronin positioned you at Le Ciel, not just to save Alexander, but to ensure you would be drawn into this. Sophia's mind raced, processing the implications. If she truly was the cognitive key to Prometheus, it meant she had the power to either enable or prevent its activation, regardless of physical keys or biometric access. It doesn't matter, she stated firmly. I won't help you weaponize Prometheus against American citizens. You misunderstand your role. Ms. Reeves, Harrington replied, his tone almost pitying. Your cooperation isn't required. Your cognitive patterns are already embedded in the system. All we need is your physical presence during the activation sequence. Alexander shook his head. That's where you're wrong, Senator. The cognitive key isn't passive, it's active. It requires conscious engagement. Sophia would need to willingly execute the initialization sequence. Uncertainty flickered across Harrington's face for the first time. He glanced toward the door, clearly concerned about the security breach Hayes had gone to address. Time is running short, he said, his composure slipping. Perhaps a demonstration of our resolve would be helpful. He nodded to one of the remaining guards, who drew his sidearm and aimed it at Alexander. Consider carefully, Mrs. Reeves, Harrington continued. Your cooperation ensures his survival. Your resistance guarantees his death. And for what? A principle, a moral stance that will be forgotten when Prometheus is eventually activated anyway. Sophia met Alexander's gaze, finding not fear, but quiet resolve. Don't, he said simply. Whatever happens to me, Prometheus cannot fall into his hands. A sudden commotion outside the door interrupted the standoff. Shouting, followed by several muffled impacts and the distinctive sound of bodies hitting the floor. The guards tensed, weapons raised toward the entrance. The door burst open and a smoke grenade bounced into the room, immediately filling the space with dense, disorienting fog. Sophia reacted instinctively, dropping to the floor and rolling away from her last known position. She heard the guards shouting, confused and disoriented in the smoke, followed by the distinctive sound of suppressed gunfire. When the smoke began to clear, Sophia found herself staring at a familiar face, Mia, dressed in tactical gear and looking nothing like the disheveled cybersecurity specialist she'd known. Behind her stood Dr. Voronin, Professor Wayland, and a team of operators in unmarked combat uniforms. Sorry we're late, Mia said with a grim smile, offering Sophia a hand up. Traffic was terrible. Alexander emerged from the smoke, seemingly unharmed. The guards lay unconscious on the floor, while Senator Harrington was being secured by two of the operators, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. How? Sophia asked, taking in the scene with bewilderment. The contingency plan, Voronin explained briskly. When we lost contact with you, we activated our backup team. You had a military unit standing by? Alexander asked, equally surprised. Not military, Wayland corrected. Private contractors, former special forces operators who've been thoroughly vetted and who have family members on the Prometheus target list. People with a vested interest in preventing its misuse. Harrington struggled against his restraints. This is treason. You're interfering with a classified government operation. No, Senator, came a new voice from the doorway. You're the one committing treason. Director Malcolm Wells stepped into the room, flanked by additional agents in FBI tactical gear. His silver hair and weathered face were exactly as Sophia remembered from her time at the agency. Wells, she said, tensing. But you were part of this. You modified Prometheus. Wells's expression was grim. I did, under duress. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a bandage, covering what appeared to be a recent surgical wound. Subcutaneous explosive device. Insurance to ensure my cooperation. Senator Harrington's idea of persuasion, understanding, dawned on Sophia. You weren't working with him willingly. I played along until I could contact people I trusted, Wells confirmed, including your former colleague. He nodded toward Mia. Agent Chen has been working deep cover for the past 18 months, monitoring the Lazarus revival. Mia shrugged at Sophia's shocked expression. Sorry about the deception. Need to know basis. And Hayes, Alexander asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Genuine traitor, I'm afraid," Wells replied. "Recruited by Harrington years ago. She's been neutralized." The FBI agents took custody of Harrington from the contractors. As they led him away, he locked eyes with Sophia one final time. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "There are others who share my vision. Prometheus will be activated eventually. It's inevitable." "Perhaps," Sophia replied steadily, "but not today, and not by you." Once Harrington was gone, Wayland turned to Alexander. "We need to access Prometheus immediately. The modified system is still running. If we don't shut it down properly, it could initiate its target distribution protocol automatically." Alexander produced the encryption key from a hidden compartment in his watch. "I need to know, was any of this real, or was I just another pawn being maneuvered into position?" Voronin stepped forward, her expression softening slightly. "The threat was real. Harrington's plan was real. Your importance to stopping it was real." She glanced at Sophia, as was hers. "You used us both," Sophia stated. "It wasn't a question. We created a scenario where you would both make choices that aligned with your fundamental character," Wayland admitted. "We couldn't control those choices, only present the opportunity for them to be made." They made their way through the facility to the Prometheus chamber, a cathedral-like space dominated by quantum processors encased in transparent cooling units. At its center stood a single terminal, awaiting final authentication. "This is it," Alexander said, inserting his key into the terminal. "Sophia, are you ready?" She hesitated, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" "Simply engage with the system," Voronin explained. "It will recognize your cognitive patterns, the way you process information, the unique neural signatures that formed the basis of its predictive algorithms." Sophia placed her hands on the neural interface pads on either side of the terminal. The screen illuminated, displaying a complex pattern of shifting symbols and images. Instinctively, she began mentally analyzing the patterns, looking for connections and sequences, the same analytical process she'd applied countless times during her intelligence career. The system responded immediately, the patterns changing to match her thought processes, creating a feedback loop that felt almost like a conversation without words. She sensed, rather than saw, the corrupted code Harrington had inserted. Dark tendrils threaded through the elegant architecture of the original system. "I can see what they did," she murmured, her consciousness partially merged with the system. "They inverted the identification protocols, creating target packages based on predicted resistance patterns rather than actual threats." "Can you remove the corruption?" Alexander asked. Sophia nodded slowly, her mind working in concert with the machine. "Not just remove it. I can build immunity against similar attempts in the future." For several minutes, she worked in silent communion with Prometheus, her consciousness flowing through its digital architecture, repairing damage and creating new safeguards. When she finally withdrew from the interface, she felt both exhausted and exhilarated. "It's done," she said simply. Prometheus is secure." Later, as dawn broke over the city, Sophia stood with Alexander on the rooftop of the facility, watching the first rays of sunlight painting the skyline gold. The events of the past 48 hours felt almost dreamlike in their intensity and improbability. "What happens now?" she asked. "Prometheus will be placed under international oversight," Alexander replied. "No single government will have unilateral control. Its abilities will be strictly limited to identifying genuine foreign agents operating on domestic soil with multiple layers of judicial review." "And Harrington, facing multiple charges, including treason and attempted murder, his phoenix won't be rising from these ashes." Sophia smiled faintly at the reference. "And what about me? Do I go back to being a waitress who stopped a poisoning?" Alexander turned to face her, his expression earnest. "That's entirely up to you. But I think we both know that knocking that champagne flute from my hand wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning." As they looked out over the awakening city, Sophia reflected on how a single moment of decision, a waitress acting on instinct to prevent harm, had cascaded cascaded into the prevention of something far more insidious. One glass of poisoned champagne had been the catalyst that exposed a conspiracy to undermine American democracy itself. "I still can't believe it all started with a champagne flute," she mused. "Sometimes," Alexander replied, "the smallest actions have the most profound consequences. You prevented more than just my poisoning that night, Sophia. You saved something much more valuable." "And what was that?" she asked. "The future," he answered simply. "The future."